You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. We're into July.
I know.
My birthday's almost here.
It's your birthday month.
Yeah, I won't tell everybody my birthday, but how old am I going to be? 29?
If you say so.
No.
You're the youngest you'll ever be again. How about that?
That's true. We say that all the time. So, what am I, 49? I'll be 49.
You'll be 49. You're almost 50.
Yeah, big 50 next year.
That's like I say about my oldest child. He's almost 30. You're almost 50.
Yeah, I remember as a teenager, we thought 40 was old.
Oh, we thought 40 was ancient.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyhow, enough about my birthday month. So, today's topic is something we talk about quite often. We'll probably repeat things we've repeated, but we do an episode every week, so that's bound to happen. But the title is, What's the Best Test for Toxic Mold? If I was to ask you that, you know more than most of our listeners, but if I was to ask you that, what would you say?
There is no best test. It has to be a comprehensive evaluation that involves multiple test approaches.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. I had a discovery call with some clients this week, and I was explaining the whole, you need to have a mold inspection done. And, they were somewhat like, well, can't we just do an EMMA test? And anyhow, what I ended up telling them, and I'm telling our audience this, the visual inspection with the right inspector is more important, in my opinion, than any testing.
Absolutely, because testing is a snapshot in time. That doesn't mean that the day after you test, you couldn't have a moisture intrusion event, your basement flood, and the testing a week after that would be much different.
Yeah, it reminds me of clients that when we do remediation or an SPC, they say, I want an all-clear letter.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a pass or fail, is there?
No, not really. And we've talked about that with testing.
Yeah.
I mean, there is things that we look at and that did not look good at all.
I mean, there are red flags.
Exactly.
But not pass or fail.
No. And my point is, you just said it, let's say there was an all clear, everything looks great. Well, we're testing inside of containments. We've had negative air. We shut our machines off before we run air testing. But my point is, and you just said it, a week later, a day later, their basement could flood and change everything. So kind of a quick off the subject topic for our listeners, but there's no all clear. And if you have an all clear, doesn't mean it's always going to be an all clear.
Absolutely.
So to touch on what you said, there is not a silver bullet test, period.
No, and I think a lot of people have their preferred tests, including professionals in the mold industry. And a lot of people, as mold professionals, IEPs, consultants, coaches, doctors, they will tell their clients/patients, this is the test. I think it's really important for people to use their own common sense to realize that in anything that involves health, in anything that involves home, there is no one test that is the end all be all.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, it's like you brought up doctors. Is there a silver bullet test if you go in there and tell them you have headaches all the time?
No, there's nothing. So I think a lot of people rely on tests because they feel like tests will either give them a sigh of relief that everything is fine, or a test will tell them everything's awful, which will lead them to a cure. But how does that work in the mold world?
So I'll address the different types of testing. So when we talk about traditional testing, when I talk about that's a non-viable test. So we're not using a petri dish. We're not waiting for the mold to become viable, colonize, and grow. We're literally doing the test. If it's an air test, we use a slide that traps the particles on it. We send it off to a lab. We have results depending on how long it takes to get to the lab and what the turnaround time from the lab is. We can have results within a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And that's because they're looking at this under a microscope.
Yeah.
So traditional testing, just to be clear for our clients and our listeners, it is not going to tell us the mold species. It's only going to tell us the mold type. Mm-hmm. So like if it's Aspergillus, we don't know if it's, Aspergillus niger or Aspergillus versicolor. Matter of fact, Aspergillus and Penicillium, they look similar under a microscope. So when it's reported with traditional testing, it's reported as ASPEN. ASP-PEN.
Okay, because they can't really
They don't know the difference.
Okay.
So traditional testing can be an air test, which takes us 5 minutes to do. It can be a tape lift. It can be a swab or a bulk sample.
What's a bulk sample?
A bulk sample would be, and about the only time that I do bulk samples, and I actually have a bunch. You've seen them sitting around. You probably wonder, you're like, well, why do you have this? Just because
Is that all the little cartridges?
No, those are the tape lifts, but the little pieces of sheetrock everywhere.
Oh, yes.
You'll see after I do a project, I always have a baggie.
Of that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's called a bulk sample.
So you take a piece of where the affected area is with the mold on it, and then you can send it to a lab?
I can.
Okay.
But what I do, so for our listeners, they're like, well, Steve seriously keeps those? They're in Ziplocs, but I just cut a piece out that has mold on it. For me, honestly, it's more of a cover my butt kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And if something ever comes up, I can go, oh, so this project I did last year, they're trying to claim that there's now something toxic in the air and it wasn't there before. I could literally take that bulk sample and send it to the lab and go, oh, really? Mm-hmm. So it's a CYA kind of a thing that I do. But for our listeners, a bulk sample is literally a piece of something that we believe has mold on it. Remember, years ago, I sent some hay.
Yes, that's right. You did.
To the lab.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know if my client had farmer's lung. Like, we didn't know if there was mold in the hay. They had a dog that had died. Like, it was a pretty complex issue I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. I literally sent them a little Ziploc with the hay in it.
That's right.
And I guess I don't even remember. That's been years ago, but I think it came back with mold on it. I can't even remember.
I think it did, actually.
So anyhow, those are what we call traditional testing. Those are going to be your cheapest form of testing. All IEPs charge different prices, but I think on our website we charge $90 per sample. Some people charge $150, some charge only $60. I don't know, but it's the cheapest form of testing and it's the quickest way we get turnaround time.
Is there, in your expert opinion, any ballpark amount of money for traditional testing that you would say, and this is your opinion, that that's way too high? Because I hear people spending thousands and thousands of dollars on mold testing. Like, what should they, ballpark from your opinion, be paying for traditional testing?
Well, just like everything in mold, it really depends on the situation. But for the most part, for my clients and our listeners, if you're paying more than $1,000, I don't think you're going down the right path.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, there was way, way back in the day when I first became a mold inspector, I had a client that was buying a hotel, and I literally ran an air test in every room.
Oh, yeah, that would be different.
And that's what I mean by every situation's different.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, for our listeners, don't spend a bunch of money on testing.
Okay, that makes sense. And now with the traditional testing, is it good to do all of the types, like air testing, tape lift, swab? And under what conditions would you, why would you do a tape lift over an air test or a swab over a tape lift?
So a swab and a tape lift would be used for the same reason.
Okay.
That's just preference.
Okay.
I prefer, and some of the labs I work with don't like swabs, because if you think about it, for our listeners, it's literally like a cotton swab.
Okay.
And so when you're rolling it around, and so to back up a little bit, the reason you would do a tape lift or swab is if you could visibly see mold. Well, this is why I would do it. You could visibly see mold and you want to verify if it is or isn't mold.
Okay.
But when you use a swab, if you think about it, you're rolling it. Well, then it makes it harder for the lab to analyze it.
Yeah.
Whereas a tape lift, for our listeners, we use, it's called biotape. Back in the day, I think her name was May Dooley. She's passed away. She was on the East Coast. In some of the mold groups, they would literally get a piece of Scotch tape and do a tape lift and send it to her, and she would analyze it.
Wow.
But for our listeners, a tape lift, that's literally all it is.
Okay.
So why would I do a tape lift over an air test? Because I think something is mold.
Okay.
And like for PRV testing, we do air testing and tape lifts.
Okay. And PRV stands for?
Post-remediation verification.
So after a mold mitigation job is done, you would do
a tape lift. So let's say for our listeners, let's say it was a bathroom and your cabinets got removed, the floor coverings got removed, the sheetrock got removed. There was a little bit of mold or discoloration on the wall studs, very minor. Instead of cutting it out and replacing it, which is a lot more expensive, you would just abrasively remove the suspected mold. Mm-hmm. For PRV, where we could see where they sanded it or blasted it, we would do a tape lift to make sure they got all the mold and the hyphae out.
Okay.
The hyphae is just the roots.
The roots. Okay. And so really, tape lift swab is when you can actually see the visible mold and you want to take a sample of it to go test it. Under what conditions would you do bulk sampling or air tests?
So bulk sampling, I just mentioned a client that they thought maybe their hay had mold in it. Mm-hmm. So the only way to tell is we send it off. There's other things you could do. Like I could take some of the hay and put it in a petri dish and see if it grew mold, but it just, then you wouldn't know for sure. But for a bulk sample, that's more or less, I'm not sure how to explain it because I don't want our listeners to think you shouldn't ever do bulk sampling, but it's not used very often.
Okay, so that's rare, that bulk sampling. But what about air testing then?
Air testing is the most common test we do.
Oh, it is. Okay. And why do you do air test outside and an air test in the believed to be impacted area?
So like we've always talked about, mold spores are naturally present. And the types of molds that are present will be determined where you live geographically. An air test outside in Gillette, Wyoming wouldn't show us the same things as Pinedale, Wyoming, because they're two different geographic locations. Even in Pinedale, Wyoming, I could test one house outside, and let's just say, it's a little further south of town, there's not a whole lot of trees around. It would probably give us different results than a house that has a bunch of trees everywhere.
Yeah.
So the easy, simple answer is that's our baseline.
Okay, so the outside air test gives you the baseline to compare to the what you have inside.
Exactly.
So then if traditional testing is air test, tape lifts, swabs, and bulk sampling, what would you consider non-traditional testing?
So then we get into, and some of the IEPs call it qPCR, some call it MS-qPCR. It's just terminology that's for people way smarter than me. But what that is that's something like an ERMI test or an EMMA. And the difference is the traditional test, remember I told you, only identifies the mold type. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't give us the species.
Yeah.
qPCR testing, just like ERMI or EMMA, they tell us the mold species.
Okay. So the non-traditional type ERMI, EMMA goes even deeper in the evaluation of what it is.
Yes, which is the qPCR.
Okay, so then
it's like quantitative polymerase something chain reaction. It's way over my head.
And it seems to be that these tests are the ones that people in different groups on Facebook about mold seem to live by. Like they're
the ERMI,
the ERMI is everything.
Yeah.
What is your stance on the way that people put such an emphasis on whether the ERMI says this, or I don't even know what the ERMI says, but why is that a big deal to people?
First and foremost, any of my clients that listen, any listeners that have listened in more than probably 4 episodes has heard what I think about ERMI.
Oh, you have 2 episodes on what you think about ERMI.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And those were way back before I dove deep on mycotoxins. Mm-hmm. So I want to be clear, and ERMI has its place. I'm not saying that it's worthless, but at the end of the day, it's a dust test. So is the EMMA. So I want to explain that a little bit. When we do the traditional testing, if we run an air test in this, YouTube room or sound booth, I'm only going to run it in here. Mm-hmm. That's one test. I don't run the test in here, keep the same cassette in there, go in the office, then go in the family room. It's only in here.
Okay.
So we can clearly identify what's going on in this room. Mm-hmm. Whereas a dust sampling, you're gathering dust from the entire home except for bathrooms, garage, laundry rooms you probably shouldn't. It's just like, how do you know when you do an ERMI or an EMMA? They're both dust. How do you know which room is the problematic one?
You don't if you're just compiling the dust samples together. Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, it's I don't know a good analogy on the medical side to compare it to, but you're not sure how to pin it down to each room. And that's why, once again, every situation's different. Do we do EMMA testing and air testing? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so if we did that and we the results came back with concerns on the EMMA side, we can go back and look at the air testing and go, okay, I think it's in this room. Well, why would I think it's in this room? Well, it's based on the air sampling results and my visual inspection. Because maybe this certain room had some chatomium or higher aspen levels, and that same room is where I found all the water stains.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Now, is the ERMI the same thing as a mycotoxin test?
No.
Why do people seem to confuse them, though?
And once again, any of these listeners that have done discovery calls or they're my clients, they're going to know what I have to say about this. But there's just a lot of misinformation out there. And one of my biggest complaints about the ERMI is the fact, not that it's a dust sample, it's a DIY sampling. Now, for our listeners, so is an EMMA. Like, I don't think my clients in Illinois want to pay me to come out from Wyoming or Utah to do a dust sample. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the ERMI's it's almost looked at in some of these groups as the silver bullet test, and it's not.
It's not, yeah.
So to answer your question, I have no idea why they call it mycotoxin testing. It's not, and unless something has changed, it is only a mold species test.
So then the ERMI only looks at the mold species. It does not investigate whether there are mycotoxins present.
Yeah. So for our listeners, this is where I don't have all my notes in front of me, so I'm going to run this off the top of my head. Here's the deeper dive on that. So let's just say Stachybotrys chartarum.
Mm-hmm. Black mold.
Yes. The mycotoxin that it produces is typically a trichothecene. Mm-hmm. Well, a trichothecene is the mycotoxin. Stachy is the mold. Mm-hmm. When you do an ERMI, it only shows stachy.
Oh, it doesn't show the mycotoxin.
It doesn't show the trichothecene.
Okay.
And so, like an Aspergillus niger, maybe it produces the aflatoxin B1. Or, a gliotoxin. And my point is they're two totally separate things. You have a mold species and a mycotoxin. So if you even just give me the mycotoxin, I can tell you what mold species, and it's not always just one, are associated with it.
Correct. But the EMMA gives you the mycotoxin.
The mold species?
And it gives you both.
Yes.
Oh.
It's two separate reports.
So the EMMA is actually the test that gives you both, whereas the ERMI only gives you the mold species.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. But yet people swear by ERMI.
And I don't, obviously you know this. I used to comment sometimes in those Facebook groups. Now I'm just an observer. Mm-hmm. It's not even worth my time, I guess, to try to debate them. But the whole point is, okay, do we have toxigenic mold species in the home? Yeah, that's important. And that's what the ERMI will tell you. Mm-hmm. But is that from something that happened 20 years ago? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
And on top of that, we want to know, did those toxigenic mold species create, produce, and release the mycotoxin?
Yeah,
Because that doesn't always happen.
exactly.
Like a young rattlesnake, and I could be wrong, I'm sure I'll have a biologist that reaches out to me. I don't think young rattlesnakes, like up to a certain age, their bite, the venom's not toxic.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess what I'm hearing you say is the ERMI only tests for the mold species. The EMMA, on the other hand, gives you the mold species and the mycotoxins, but both the ERMI and the EMMA are non-traditional testing.
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
Okay, so somebody could be listening to this and they could be going, okay, so now I get the difference between traditional and non-traditional mold testing. Which should I do? What's your response to that?
It really just depends on, has the home been inspected yet? Has the listener, have they done medical mycotoxin testing?
Okay.
Like there's so many factors that play into it. It's not the same answer for every listener.
And I think that's why you do offer the mold consultations, the virtual mold consultations, to help people figure stuff like this out.
Yeah, and for a listener that's teetering on the fence, like I do complimentary discovery calls.
Yes.
I think they're only supposed to be a half hour, but they never are.
No, they never are.
They're usually a full-on consultation. But my point is with that is if you're a listener and you're wondering, and once again, obviously this podcast is free, and all our listeners know we promote something in every podcast. I don't want our listeners to think I'm always just trying to sell something, but I have to make money too.
Yeah.
But if you're on the fence and you're not sure, reach out to us, info@CNC. Someone will get back to you. Eventually you'll get through to me and we'll schedule a discovery call. I send you a Zoom link. It's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. But we can go through all your concerns and decide. And the point of the discovery call is are you a good fit for me? Do I have the knowledge that you're looking for? Which hopefully I do. And what is the next step? Is it a mold consultation? Is it a VPA?
Yeah.
And because we offer all sorts of different services.
You do. And so speaking of services, what's your call to action for people?
Just make sure you're doing the proper testing. Don't get in a mold Facebook group and they tell you to do the ERMI because that's all they ever tell everybody to do.
Yep.
Just make sure you're doing the right test. And once again, I'm not saying the ERMI's worthless. It's just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
And if you're not sure what test to do, sign up for a discovery call.
Yeah. And then we can do a consultation or maybe EMMA testing. We have all different packages you can see at our website.
Awesome.
All right. We appreciate all you listeners. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If mold in your home has you up at night, wondering if your house is making you sick, it is time for a plan. With a mold consult, in other words, the mold environment assessment and evaluation plan from CNC Contractor Services, you will get a 90-minute strategy call with Steve Worsley, who will review your home environment, answer your toughest questions, and create personalized mold recommendations and next steps just for you. Don't let mold concerns take over. Take control. Visit cnccontractorservices.com to schedule your mold consult today so you can breathe easier in your home tomorrow.